I'm Greg Clark. I live in London. I work all over the world. And for the last 40 years, I've worked with 400 cities around the world, helping to guide their strategies, their visions, their plans, their investment processes, helping really cities to think about their futures. And I've done that mainly as a kind of policy advisor and technical expert, and I've worked with a number of platforms from the World Bank to the United Nations to the OECD and many more.
I want to take you back to the beginning of coaching and ask you what kind of challenges were you facing when you approached me?
Well, Anna, when I met you, I was already what some people would call late career. I think I was 57, 58, and I'd been working in a similar pattern for 3 decades, 3.5 decades. And I'd been very lucky, actually. I'd got to do everything I knew I wanted to do. And I'd written 10 books about cities, and I'd visited these 400 cities in all of these different continents. But I think my work had become a little bit repetitive. And I'd got to the point where I sort of thought another few years of what I've already done doesn't feel quite like the best use of my time. And I had this kind of appetite to discover what else I might want to do, what was hiding in plain sight, what might be the thing that if I didn't do it now, I'd miss the chance to do it. Those were the things that were on my mind.
How are you feeling around all those questions that you were asking yourself?
Well, I think one feeling was a feeling of being perhaps stuck and not knowing how to get out of being stuck. It's quite a funny thing to say you're stuck when you're one of the best people in your field and you're a genuine leader. But it is possible, I think, to get stuck in a certain kind of repetitive trap where you're just doing the same things, you're just adding more increments to what you've already done. So that was one feeling. I think another feeling was that I wasn't using my full self. I was felt that I was bringing 50% of myself to my work, and there were things that were missing, things that I wasn't employing, and if you like, there was a kind of a desire to employ more of what I could bring, and some of that I think was about bringing more creativity and perhaps a little bit less methodology. So that was a feeling. And then I think there was a third one of kind of wondering, well, what will the end of career be like if I'm already in the final stages? And do I have much choice about that? Would I like to have a little bit more agency or autonomy in how I shape the final stages of my career, however long they are? And I think, I was approaching my 60s sort of a couple of years ahead and thinking, well, am I retiring when I'm 60 or when I'm 65? And what will I have done? What will the ending of my work life actually look and feel like? And I didn't know the answers to those questions. And I felt I really needed some help to address those.
And if you think about the amount of coaches that are out there in the world, what was it that drew you to me specifically?
Yeah, it was really interesting, Anna, because I sort of knew I didn't want a coach who was going to say, okay, let's set some goals and hit these targets and, let's get a strategic plan for the rest of Greg's career. I kind of knew it wasn't that. I knew that I needed a coach who was going to help me learn about who I am, help me find the words for the things I didn't have words for yet, help me establish the kind of identity I wanted to have in the work that I do. And underlying all of that, I think, was this feeling of wanting to bring more of myself to the task, but to do that in ways that were creative. You see, when I started my work life, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I fell into the work I do almost by accident. I had thought when I was a student at university, I might well in the future be a writer or a poet or an actor or something, but I didn't know how to do any of those things. So I ended up with a job in local government. And because I worked in local government, my career sort of developed that way. So I think I was looking for somebody who might help me make sense of my whole life in terms of how I work and bring more of a creative edge to what I was doing. So I pretty deliberately looked for a coach who was able to work with creativity and leadership, somebody who was able to bring together leadership of an artistic form or leadership on a big aspect of human development or the future of the planet, a big issue that matters to all of us, and add creativity into that so that rather than trying to persuade people of how they should change their lives in order to be better, why not find ways to inspire them rather than persuade them? And I think I was looking for somebody who could help me become more inspirational. And I found you.
That's very nicely put. So let's get into the work itself. What was your experience like of the coaching process?
Well, Anna, because I started with you when I was already in my late 50s, I did have a bit of a feeling that it wasn't going to be a quick fix. I'm one of those people who's quite habitual. I built up a lot of habits over time. I built up a lot of contractual obligations as well. You know, I was a non-executive director in one organization, a chair of another organization, a contracted professor in one university, a contracted advisor to multiple cities. And I think I knew that the process of change was going to take a little bit of time. I remember saying to you right at the beginning that I kind of am in love with my subject. I'm in love with the issue of cities and human population and how people live together on a finite planet. But I find myself increasingly spending a high proportion of my time, I think I might have said to you 90% of my time, doing the things I think I have to do rather than the things I really want to do. And you helped me really explore what was the difference between those two things. What were the things I wanted to do? How were they different to the things I felt I had to do? And we began a bit of a journey of kind of unwinding all of that. I remember I sort of think that we did coaching in three phases. In the first phase, I think there was a lot of discovery and a lot of self-learning. You were helping me really understand who I am and how I work and why I do things the way I do them. And you were revealing to me that there's a kind of a set of choices. There was the opportunity for me to be more autonomous, to have more agency, to be more intentional. Then I think there was a second phase where we talked a lot about, you know, giving up the idea of trying to plan a career and instead finding a pathway that was coming more from the heart and the soul, coming more from me, coming more from the place of joy, more from a place of exuberance, more from a place of kind of creative engagement with the things I'd sort of learned a bit more in the first phase. And then I think there was a third phase where what we did was to really embed some ways of changing. And, you know, you taught me a lot about what change actually means. And I had a lot of resistance, of course. And we played a bit of snakes and ladders. You know, there were days or weeks when I'd go up a ladder. There were other days and weeks when I'd come down a snake. But eventually we sort of got to the end of the board and we together implemented, I think, a lot of change that I'm now benefiting from. And, you know, the consequence was, I think, that if you ask me today, I'd say now 90% of my time is spent on things I really want to do and really love doing. And only 10% of my time is spent on things I have to do, like filling in my tax return.
Uh, yeah, that's a really significant switch, isn't it? The percentage switch. Can you say a little bit more about the results of coaching? What was actually created for you through coaching, both internally and externally?
Well, I think internally, I think that the big word is trust. I think what really happened, Anna, was that I learned to trust you, to admire you, and to believe that you were really with me and on my side, and that you were getting to know me as I was getting to know me. And you behaved with, enormous respect and intelligence and relatability towards me. And that was, I think, quite a profound experience of being sort of befriended in a very particular way. And I think the consequence of that was that you were incredibly trustworthy. I became more trusting, and I became more trusting of you, but I also became more trusting of me. And the benefit of that was that it kind of set me free from a whole sort of process of self-doubt, false modesty, imposter syndrome. There's lots of language for these things, but it kind of set me free from the placing of kind of irrelevant barriers or limitations on how I could work and what I could do. And it freed me up to be much more experimental, to be creative, if you like. So that was the internal journey. It took a while, but I think it was a beautiful journey when, as it unfolded. Um, Externally, the process was that I have gradually withdrawn from or graciously given up a whole series of commitments that I had. So I don't have lots of contracts for things I now have to do, and I've stopped, in a sense, doing the things that I thought I ought to do, like trying to be visible and prominent and important and significant, which I'd had a few years of doing that. And I'm very grateful for all the reward I got from that, but I realize I don't need that kind of reward anymore. And so I've now embarked upon three or four quite big creative projects. So right at the beginning of coaching, sort of 4.5, 5 years ago, I started a podcast called The DNA of Cities, which is essentially an investigation into how cities evolve alongside the human beings that live in them, and how the evolution of humans shapes the evolution of cities, and how cities can be shaped in such a way that they help and promote the evolution of humans. So it's really about applying ideas from genetic science and evolutionary theory to the way cities emerge. And we've now done two series of this podcast. We've been commissioned to write the book of the podcast. We've now got a series of cities that are becoming members of the community of the DNA of cities. And we're sort of producing, I think, a new set of insights about the ecology of our own human habitat, which I really like. We've established another project called the Century of Cities, where the big dramatic idea is that human population has been growing for 250,000 years, roughly. But we've entered the last century of human population growth. And because this is the last century in which we grow, suddenly we're facing some completely new truths. So, for every day of every person's life who might be watching this conversation between you and me, two things have been true for every day of their lives so far. One, human population's been growing, and two, human population has been moving to cities. And all of that is about to end, Anna. In 55 years' time, that will all be over. So we're reaching a kind of end cycle moment in which we have to be much more conscious about the cities we create, how we build them, how we get ready for human population decline, and how we live in ways that are more frugal, more flexible, and more agile with our planet. So I've started to develop a kind of end cycle philosophy about how cities emerge. And this is also now a podcast, and it's also going to become a book, and it's going to become a series of kind of lectures that we're going to take around the world, kind of inviting people to consider the end of human population growth and what it means for how we live together and what we do. So these are the sorts of things I'm now involved with. I'm also much more frequently now exploring with people what is the DNA of the places that they really feel connected to, and how does their individual DNA and the DNA of a place somehow form a relationship. And I've come to believe that there's quite a deep ecology in the way that any human relates to the place in which they live or they work or they have family ties, and that the exploration of that deep ecological relationship actually brings meaning to people's lives. So we're doing that with poetry, we're doing it with conversation, we're doing it in workshops and webinars, and we're doing it in any way actually that people want to do it. We've got some core ideas here, which is sort of it's a kind of new form of urban anthropology actually, and I we're in the process still of discovering it. So for me, this is really, really fascinating, and this is the thing I suppose that has tapped into that yearning that I had to really discover the things I wanted to do that I didn't know. And I think we got there, and I think this is it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the work you're doing is extraordinary. You've just said some stuff there that's really big. And I've sat with you, obviously, and heard the detail inside of the statements that you've just made. I'm going to say to anybody who has just had their ears significantly pricked up by what you said, to go and listen to the podcasts that Greg has mentioned. Check out his website. There's a lot of really great resources on there. I'm going to put links in the show notes for easy access, but I really do urge you to look at the work that Greg is doing on a global stage. It's not only extraordinary, but it's absolutely necessary right now. Have you noticed the effect that this sort of more creative aspect of your work is having on people? Would you say there's any kind of difference in terms of how your work is affecting people?
Well, I have noticed this very much, and it's partly because with your encouragement, I've given up walking on stage with lots of notes and statistics, and I've stood up on stage in conferences in 20 or 30 cities around the world in the last 6 months with no notes, no numbers, and I've just talked to them about the relationship between human evolution and urbanization. And I've talked to them about the place that we're in and the genetic code of that place and what that place offers to the human beings who are there and how that's different to every other place on the planet. And I've been talking to people about, the distinctive individuation of every place. And I've been arguing that actually, if we have a planet of 15,000 distinctive, individual, different, differentiated cities, it's going to really enrich human life. And I think the way people are responding is by feeling excited, by feeling really kind of magnetized in a certain way around this conversation. And I think it gives them a heightened sense of their own choices about where they might want to live and where they might want to work. And the choice of location not just being one about the cost of housing or the quality of schools, but the choice of location is about the choice of what you want to be inspired by. And I
Mm.
think people have really got that now.
Yeah, lovely. Was there anything unexpected that emerged out of coaching for you?
uh, and it was all unexpected, I think, is the only answer I can give you. um, I think what was unexpected was that it took us some time. And I think that was because of me. I was bringing a lot of habits and ways of thinking and ways of doing things that we really did need to unwind. And it needed the time it needed. And I think, it was 5 to 6 years in the end that we needed. And I think I really needed that. So I didn't know that was the case. So in a way, that was a surprise. Um, I think another surprise was kind of some of the tools that you brought, especially early on, where essentially you were getting me to do all we did almost kind of hypnotism at times, a very creative kind of helping me to get into a dream-like state and to really discover what was lying underneath the ghosts that I was afraid of, or the things I couldn't see and the things I couldn't feel. So that kind of self-revelation, I think, was a surprise, not a shock, but a surprise, and in a way, a delight as well. And then I think that one of the other surprises was the way you helped me to see where I was reluctant to change. When you had to be tough with me, a lot of it was about saying to me, actually, Greg, you do know what you need to do here. You do know how to change. Why are you not doing it? And there were a few occasions where you held me to account and I wriggled a lot. But in the end, that was very important because you really helped me to understand that it was my agency that had to be employed, and that things that felt impossible to change actually were going to change, but I had to rub myself up against them and stay with them. I couldn't escape, if you like. The desire to escape the process of change was quite deep in me at various times. But you made me stick to it.
For anyone who is watching this, who is considering working with me and yet finding themselves possibly in a state of doubt or maybe even skepticism around if this is right for them or what they might get out of coaching, specifically coaching with me, is there anything that you would say to that person right now?
Well, I think I would say two things. One is it's not going to do you any harm. You've got nothing to lose. And Anna's way of recruiting clients is a very mutual process. I mean, if I remember correctly, Anna, you and I had several sessions before we reached a contract that we were going to work together. Those sessions were led by you, but they were very much about exploring me. And I think that what went on there was however much time was needed for us to figure out that Greg wanted to work with Anna and Anna wanted to work with Greg. And I really appreciated the fact that we had those 3 or 4 sessions where we figured out that actually there was something we wanted to do together. I thought you brought exceptional kind of intelligence and patience and thoughtfulness to that recruitment. I felt it was a bit like a courtship, actually, and I like that. So I would say to anybody who's kind of thinking about this, Anna's process for establishing whether you two should work together is a good process, and it's worth doing that in itself. That would be the first thing. So it's not a big yes no decision. It's a bit let's really talk about this decision. I think that was very important. And then the second thing I would say is if you're like me and you have this feeling that things are good, things are going well, you're having a successful career, but there might be more of you that can be brought to your work. There might be an opportunity for you to be deeper or bigger or more impactful or to simply bring more of yourself to what you're doing, then I suspect Anna's the person you need to work with. And if you have the chance to do it now, um, don't miss that chance. I think that would be my key message. I'm very glad that I didn't miss the chance and that we got the chance. And you never know, depending on your age and your circumstance, will the chance come round again? So I think it's something not to put off if you have the chance to do it now. That would be my advice. I think it would be obvious to everyone that I feel I benefited hugely from our time together. And in a certain way, um, I've been set free to do the things that I really want to do. And I'll always be very grateful for that.